Ian?
We are live.
Hello everybody. I need to move over, huh? Picture.
I
Hello everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Oh yeah. Welcome to open.clouds.dev. Deep a doo doo. Deep
Welcome to Insanity.
boo doo boo 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 doo.
That took a while. That took a while. Good evening. Wait, let me look. Dominique Schneider.
Oh,
Yes.
hello.
And good morning, Christopher Branston.
Hello everyone. Hello world. Hello Carsten. Hello Dom.
Hello, Carsten. Hello, Chris. It is nice to see you again. I'm
Okay,
just trying
awesome show. We
to.
should repeat that.
All
See
right.
you
Thanks
later.
for watching. See you next time.
Next week. Awesome. Looking forward to that. Yes. How are you guys doing?
Oh, awesome.
Today is an
Great,
awesome
actually.
day.
Yeah.
Great.
So, spent
Because
about 2.5 hours outside in the sun before it started to rain. So we came inside. So we came back inside. 5 minutes later, it started to rain. So everything went perfect. I just liked it.
yeah,
It was
that
great.
was exactly what I was referring to.
Oh. It's been raining here ever since like Friday, but we had like 19 degrees yesterday and 15 today, so
Hmm.
feels like summer's coming back.
Actually,
96 degrees
I had
in the
awesome weather here
Yeah.
today. Like 15 degrees sun. I was actually riding my bike this morning. It was great.
I bet. How far did you ride your bike?
Just roughly 20 kilometers because I had to deliver a package to UPS. Not UPS to me. I had to deliver a package to UPS.
You're doing
Because
it
I
wrong.
yesterday managed to completely destroy and brick and bootlock my awesome Google Pixel 3, and I had a great chat with the Susan. I don't know how I come to that name. With the Google support, and they basically, although the device is out of warranty, and I handled and I were responsible for doing the software bricking, they basically decided I get a replacement device for free.
Not
So
too shabby.
that is awesome. That is awesome customer support. Um, or
The
perhaps they
good thing
try,
is Google
or they
knows
tried to
everything
bribe
about
me.
you already.
Pardon me.
So Google always knows everything about you already. So their customer service probably, yeah, is top notch.
That explains why the support representative picked up the line and said it took you a while.
Yeah, I was waiting for your call for like 2 days now.
Like, what the hell's wrong with you?
No. Um, but that's why I was outside and I got yelled upon because I was not wearing a mask when entering the room, just my t-shirt. And the clerk there was basically like, "You have to wear a mask." And I said, I'm covering my face and my nose, so no, you have to wear a mask. We have pictures. I was looking at those pictograms and I said, yes, okay, those are mask pictograms, but outside it is written mouth and nose covering. And I had a mouth and nose covering. Not an ear covering, Dom. That does not count as valid. Sorry. No, you failed. You screwed up. No, no,
Oh,
no,
oh well,
no,
oh well.
no chance. Well, that was my morning. And how was your morning, guys?
Sounds like a great morning.
It
If
actually
you're not a
was. It actually
CEO of
was.
a
I was
company,
quite happy.
you have to work. I've been working.
You've been working. You've been the one
Yes.
working.
Can we skip the question?
Well, no.
Oh,
So how has your walk been? Was it cool? Was it like regular Tuesday or annoying?
Fun.
That's good.
Fun. I try to, this is something that really pisses off my management, and it's always, ever since I started working, I actually am an okayish performer, and
Open source 2028.
every time that we get into serious conversations about personal development and how work should be, I always mention fun. Have some fun.
I
And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to have fun,
I
connect
think
people.
that's a great approach because if work is completely void of fun and it's just like you try to get over the rounds, just try to pass the time, and the only thing that motivates you is the paycheck at the end of the month, I don't think that. I mean, if it's a job that's basically dumb as dude, then it's okay. For example, you're just doing stupid stuff where you basically invest no like emotions, no brain power. You just basically sit there, sort stuff or whatever. I think that's kind of okayish because after work you're still like energized. You can do stuff, but I think in a lot of situations, um, if the job is demanding and frustrating at the same time, nah.
Today I was thinking about a lot of different topics concerning communication, modern workflows, digital transformation, all this stuff. And one thing I've mentioned there is that the problem with computers and AI and algorithms and whatever it is, or actually not so much a problem, a good thing is that computers and machines aren't self-aware and don't have a conscience. They don't have consciousness. Um, and I think that is very, very interesting because in a lot of the fields that different people are working in, and with digital transformation pressing on and on, we're taking more and more of the human component out of everyday work. And that's kind of boring, because the actual value of having a staff of humans working for you is this human component and our emotions and our self awareness and is consciousness. So, yeah, just as a side note, it's great
Yeah,
being.
but I think makes a lot of sense. And for example, I would probably hate my job if it would be complete without people. So I always thought that I prefer dealing with computers to people. Until I did it for quite some time, just to figure out that being completely without like social engagement, social contact, etc., it's not only it feels bad for your own psychological health, but also I think you're not as good as if you are in touch with other people because you do get other ideas, other perspectives, and basically it also keeps you interested in what you're doing. So
Yes, exactly. I mean, feedback, creating a
yeah.
feedback loop is very, very important if you want to grow and develop.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
excuse me. News. News.
news.
It was the thing that you wanted to do, Chris. You wanted to revert back to our old format. That's why I figured I'm going to showcase that a little bit because we collected the most important news of this week. And who is
And vanilla stack, open source is really cool.
and Susie
I'm gonna
Cast?
open my own company and I will implement the Stracciatella stack.
Well, little bit differently. They want to get rid of like 70%, 80% of their workforce because their old business model was pretty much outsourcing. Not complete IBM, but basically you had a black IBM, you had a blue IBM, and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure which one it was.
All colors are beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally on your side.
Tattoo show.
Green.
No, I'm figuring Carsten is more the piercings guy.
And what
The
makes me,
90s
what
were
scares
wild.
me is we don't see any.
No, the point is, you could, if you look closely, you would see I had piercings here when I was like 13. And today my piercings are, and anyhow, they basically that basically aligns with, you guys can joke around in a few seconds, but please let me be honest for 1 second. That basically aligns with what SAP told us last week, because during the new situation, the new pandemic situation, you basically end up with a world where people just want to consume those things easily, like cloud services, and that is about it. And that is basically what they are reacting to. And frankly, it is basically Red Hat plus X and not IBM minus something. The traditional IBM is going to be spun off. That is basically the outcome of that thing. And frankly, we discussed that on Friday, Chris, in Friday Catch Up.
Oh, yes.
Which, by the way, was a great show. I so much love Emil. And you, obviously.
It's so harsh. I love Emil too at my Friday catch up.
I love Emil more.
No, you don't.
Oh yeah, I do. Always one more
Where's
than
Emil
you.
when you need him?
Always one more than you. No, but basically we discussed that on Friday. That will have a pretty disruptive effect on jobs, I'd say.
Yes.
Because the new company they will spin off, they need to make money somehow, and what will they do? They will, from my perspective, go and let people go, because...
I mean, maybe an interesting question. Since you also, as CEO, have the responsibility for every part of the company, and some morning, apparently, they hired a new controller at IBM, and he knew how to use Excel and add numbers and subtract stuff and do trends. And then they figured out, hey, 80% of our actual revenue is coming from our legacy business, which is kind of apparently not so good if you're trying to be one of the major cloud players of the world. If you want to be hip, if you want to be a cool cloud company, put cloud into your name, people will buy it. No, just kidding. But the thing we have to think about here is, well, I'm figuring it's a financial move, and it's also, something that came from controlling from the strategy department. But the major issue I see with this is, once again, that the loser at the losing end of this whole process is the customer, is us users. Because we've been talking a lot about the value of on-premise and bare metal and going into the cloud and hybrid solutions and whatnot. We've talked so much about this. And with a move like that, like IBM is doing, you're actually pressuring your customer into a decision. Because it will be a lot easier to basically, to basically say, dear customer, I'm not offering a certain package or service anymore. I don't care how long your contracts with us were standing. I don't care about the deal behind it. The company's not existent anymore. And you couldn't do that if you weren't doing the split. Otherwise, you would probably have to say, like, we have to think about this and think about a new contract and about new fair terms.
I mean, they will. Chris, they will definitely continue on their old contracts, not IBM, but Nuco, as the internal name is now. So as a customer, you will have your business continuity in that regard. But what they basically do, and I totally agree with you on that, they basically throw away all the unsexy things because don't forget about that, IBM is a listed company and it's all about fantasy. It's all about your stock value, your market value. And I feel like, frankly, we've seen something similar with T-Systems this year in Germany. I don't know if you remember that this year, basically they announced that there will be a T-Systems, and the parts of the companies that are, let me put it that way, that feel more future proven will be integrated into Deutsche Telekom, the mother company. And T-Systems then will ultimately, I don't know, be spun off, perhaps even merged with Nuco, because all of that is outsourcing business, and that is basically what remains there. Could even imagine that is going to happen. They might merge those two old school parts of companies with each other to form a major outsourcer. Something like Bechtle or...
I mean, I imagine it might be really, really funny when the poor old sales guy, the poor salespeople, when the sales guy will have to go into a shop like Deutsche Bank and say like, I know you built this whole building and everything around the mainframe you purchased from us for I don't know how many million, but by the way, we decided that we're going to be a cloud company now and we're going to do cloud first. So basically, hey, just push all your shit into the cloud. It will be good for everyone.
Yeah, but basically, I feel like obviously that is going to be a future. And Chris, haven't we had, and Dom, you can sing songs about that. Please don't. Chris and I just this afternoon had a short conversation about CapEx versus OpEx, stuff like that.
No PEX.
No PEX, yeah, exactly. No, but basically, I feel like there's also part of the new world where controllers basically are the decisive. Oh, I'm too tired. The ones making the decisions. Decisive force.
You have to be decisive, Carsten. Speak your heart out. Be straightforward. Be decisive.
No, I'm going to speak German because German. So, die sind die Entscheider. They are the decision makers. But the point is in the books it basically looks better. Because you don't have those kind of upfront investments, you just pay monthly expenses, and that looks better in the books than just writing off stuff. Although it makes a lot of sense, it's way more sustainable and so on and so forth. I've been telling that for years, but nobody's listening to me. Just as in the second, and the point is ultimately, I feel like that is going to happen there, right? Future is cloud because it looks better in the books.
The whole meta scenario, corporate and also private wise, is more and more shifting into also like I would say kind of a personal OpEx system that is based on consumption as a service.
Yeah.
To put it like that. For example, I still remember when the MPEG-3 codec was released. So when the Fraunhofer, they released the first MP3 codec, and suddenly you were able to crunch down music files. So I still remember when I digitized my first song from a CD, and basically you could calculate like 10 megabytes per minute. And with hardware or hard disk ranges about 300 to maybe 500 megabyte, this was very soon becoming quite crippling. And suddenly MP3, suddenly you had a song in like 3 or 4 5 megabytes. That was just awesome and mind-blowing. And of course, you had the one side, you had the development with all like peer-to-peer connections, eDonkey, eMule, Napster, Kazaa, and all these, not Kazaa, but especially Napster.
LimeWire.
Yeah, LimeWire, all this sharing mentality. So suddenly people started to spread music. But
Wasn't E-Mule as well? I'm remember
yeah,
that.
but
Yeah.
Emule was more focused on bigger files. So Emule, eDonkey, and the Esel2K forums was more based for like movie material, not
Which I never
necessarily
used. I never ever used. Never
I
ever.
was announced Flame Queen in the ESL forum, so I think I cannot say I have never ever dealt with it. So, but of course only for scientific purposes.
Exactly
Um,
for educational purposes. Yeah.
yeah, actually, yeah, because we
I
had
was
to figure
only
out.
browsing casually.
I learned a lot about IP privatization because at that time I was still studying informatics. So we actually used some clients in our workshops to figure out configurations. So, but what I was aiming at is in the past you actually you purchased your music files or you were even downloaded them, whether that was legal or illegal. I mean, they were also
Just
quite
Dom,
early.
I just
They were the
wanted to
first.
say. I just wanted to say, who in this group actually purchased his music files?
Me.
Can I see my finger? Yes, here. Yeah.
No, I mean,
Actually,
not just one.
No, a lot of
no.
them.
My first my first payable music download was called MP3 Sugar, and I could upload like credits via through a credit card, and then you paid like between 8 and 20 cents per song, depending on how old it is. And since I have nothing to do with charts, etc., and usually just listen to like my gothic stuff, etc., like Cure, so songs were about 4 to 8 cents each. So that was awesome. So
Why
I lived with
hasn't
my
that? Why has
30
that business
euros or
model not taken
$30.
off? Why hasn't that business model not taken off? I truly mean
That's what
it.
I was aiming at. So that was actually what I was aiming for, considering the whole Apex and OPEX CAPEX situation. So that was technically um, kind of a, let's say, quite close to a CAPEX because I
Yeah.
had to pay a specific amount of money for a specific amount of songs. So if I want an album, they said, okay, to download it costs you like, let's say, $3. So you pay and you got the album. Nowadays, what we have is, for example, Spotify, and where you either you get a pay account or you get a free account, but then you can't skip songs and you get adverts. But if you don't like it, so you pay, and suddenly you shift your whole music consumption into an OPEX model where you pay your subscription fee to Spotify, but in the turn, in turn, you are not having any kind of even rough ownership of your music consumption
The same is,
because
but on the other hand, the same is, for example, true in regards to ownership. I just want to mention that if you look at, for example, Amazon or yeah, other services where you can buy movies
Mhm,
because you don't actually
exactly,
buy them, you just buy a license to play them as long as they are in the ownership or have a contractual relationship with those who actually own them. That is
exactly.
that is basically, although it feels different, but actually it's not that different
And,
in the
and I
end.
think that's where you have the clash between what I consider a personal preference against a corporate preference. Because corp wise it's great if you have everything in an opex setup, that you are very flexible, you don't have to make big investments, you don't have to
Yeah.
take any risk, etc. I mean, if I go and buy a book or buy a cd or whatever, for example, I mean, how if you guys just think back, let's say 10, 20 years, maybe 30. So how often have you bought a CD because you liked a specific song of that artist, and then they release an album, you say, okay, cool, I'm gonna get that album, and you purchase 14 songs, maybe two, one is the one that you wanted, two others are okay, and the rest is crap.
Never
So
happened with Depeche Mode. All of the songs
yeah,
were great.
exactly, depends on what you buy. But you end up in exactly this situation. You have to invest, you take a risk because you buy the full album. At that time, let's say 30 years ago, you just couldn't find all the songs on YouTube just to listen into them, to decide whether I like them or not. So you always had to risk quite a lot. But nowadays, you just pay your whatever Spotify or whatever subscription, or Amazon Music Unlimited, or I mean, we run Spotify, Netflix, and Amazon. so like Prime Video. And I mean, personally, yeah, it's cool. So and I really like it because we can, especially now with the little one, you can just like look for kids cartoons or educational cartoons and all that stuff, and it's easy. You don't have to run around, so it's not bad. But on the other side, the dependency on being connected ramps up. The planning that you suddenly have to do, if you know that you're traveling somewhere, let's say in a bit or more or less godforsaken area, and you want to listen to your favorite Spotify
You can
playlist.
make it pretty short. The
Hmm?
dependency ramps up. That's basically the point there,
Yeah.
because you remain
And
dependent.
for me as a user,
But you're not really dependent on the vendor like Spotify. You're dependent on actually more or less your internet provider.
Not
well,
truly,
and
because
also
when
not only.
once for example the vendor loses the rights on the media, and that could happen to Spotify as well. If I recall properly.
Classic example: Netflix, Amazon Prime. How many movies have been removed from their
Yeah,
offers? Or sometimes specific movies are they lose the right to show them in specific countries. Of
What
course, you can
sucks
work
for
around with
us is
VPN.
movies that are only available in German. I hate watching movies in German if they're not originally from Germany. And due to licensing blah bull crap and missing Creative Commons, I can only watch good movies in German, and that sucks.
VPN for the
Yeah,
win.
yeah. Or but still, you can take a VPN, but then you have to basically invest knowledge, skills, workaround, etc.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. I
but
totally understand.
if I like something and I buy the CDs and or the DVDs and I have them in my closet, or I still remember, for example, I just like Sucker Punch. I love the movie. It's great. I think it's a very interesting artistic piece of art. So what I did is I could get the CD quite cheap for like $7 in retail. And what I did is I just copied the raw DVD onto my NAS, so that I don't have to like dig up all the DVDs
I
because I
wanted
put
to
most of
touch
them
on
in the
that.
cellular now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have created my own digital setup to be independent, so that even if like ISP breaks down or I can't get the movie anymore because like licensing Blair whatever, because I purchased the original media, I did this capex investment.
My
So now I
Dom,
actually
Dom,
I own something that I can
Dom,
deal with. Yeah.
my next project, because I was just building two PCs here. My next project is basically building a NAS and building a ripping station to that extent. Because I
Mhm.
bought, and my girlfriend, we bought hundreds of DVDs. She specifically, and she frankly, it's becoming a pain in the ass to basically find a DVD player or a Blu-ray player
Hey,
standalone nowadays.
Carsten, Carsten, psst. Sharing is caring.
No, it's not open source art. It's not even art. But the point is, that is basically what you just laid out. Is basically the reason I want to do that. Besides the fun of building things, and then I will put it onto my own cloud, so I can basically access it everywhere in my house and while I'm on the go. And if Chris is nice, I would perhaps share
Ooh.
But aren't we with what you just kind of said and summarized from what Don said right back to the article with
yeah, exactly,
kind of
exactly.
IBM
You're
splitting
right, Chris.
companies because
Absolutely, absolutely.
you know like, why even if you don't think in private and I bought a lot of DVDs or CDs or whatever, but if you're thinking I'm responsible in a company for expenditures for projects we have, and you invest a lot of money to buy stuff that you physically own, or just stuff that you then own, and then the mean world and other vendors decide to do this transformation thing and just change the technology you've invested in, then you have a problem. And that's why all these cloud-based businesses, are ramping up, because they're giving you a false sense again of security, saying we don't care about formats, we don't care about timelines and projects and whatever, invest in us and you're safe. But actually you're,
Chris, you are
well, what
completely
is it?
right. You are completely right. But on the other hand, that touches on another aspect. and that is then basically to some extent a contradiction. Again, totally agree with what you said, what Dom said, and what I said, obviously, because we all said the same. But there's one aspect that you cannot discuss away in that regard, and I want to touch on that not from a clouds perspective, but more from a governmental finances perspective. Because here in Germany we have that kind of discussion, Black Zero, we want to have like no new debts and so on and so forth. And that basically touches similar points. Because if people say, okay, they want to basically avoid debts, we should reduce our state debts. They forget about one thing. If you would do that, you would have to pay for everything up front. And if you want to do some sort of an infrastructure project, say you create a tunnel through some mountains or whatever, and it would cost you, or say you create an airport, and it would cost you like say 10 billion.
In the first calculation.
Yeah, anyways, but it would cost you like 10 billion. You would have to invest that 10 billion upfront instead of basically lending some money and then doing that and paying for it over time. It's not completely the same, but there is a similarity in that. The problem with CapEx is that basically it binds your capital. It binds your actively usable money because you spend it. It's gone. Although you have a value there, if you then want to react, if you then want to change things, you don't have the money. You first of all have to sell what you already bought.
And it's also an issue taxation-wise, because if you do a capex investment, you basically, let's say, you buy server stuff for 10K, and then you have to consider how long will these machines do their job, and then you're allowed to calculate 4-year runtime. So then you can take this 10K and you basically split it around the expected runtime. So you have like taxation reductions of 2.5 each year, hoping that everything works out. But of course, you still have this upfront investment. It would be, for most companies, it would be easier instead of having, let's say, 2.5K tax reduction allowance per year for the next 4 years until the hardware has basically run off. Although you can still keep the hardware afterwards if it still works and runs. But I think for a company perspective, it's far easier to pay 3,000 every year for the same amount of hardware, because you can basically put it into your taxation report every single month. And I think it's a legal background or a legal framework that pushes companies towards a
unsustainable kind of
OPEX
business,
for everything.
Dom, and that pushes companies towards an unsustainable kind of business. Let's be honest.
I don't think it's per se unsustainable,
yeah, you are
but,
right. But perhaps an always, paying kind of relationship.
I think you are actually giving up a lot of autonomy and a lot of basically being your own boss. If you found a company and everything that your company does is completely run on OPEX through other providers, etc. So in the end, you're more or less just juggling contracts. If you say, all right, I have an idea, I start something, and I get the hardware, if you have the money, of course. I mean, yeah, it has a drawback, but then it's your own hardware, it's your own responsibility. You don't have to ask,
But contradiction. Not my personal contradiction, but more like what I've realized when I was talking to startups and other companies. They basically love juggling contracts because it gives them the feeling of being flexible. They basically understand that as flexibility because they do not have to truly buy into something. They are basically hopping from left to right, one stone after the other, until
that's what I meant. You have the conflict between personal preferences and corporate preferences. Because if you take this, you can jump from contract to contract, etc. If you take this mindset as a personality, would you like a human with this kind of personality to be your best friend?
Well, Chris is.
Shots have been fired. But because maybe it's just me, but from a personal perspective, okay, from my perspective, I prefer actually. I can't imagine even if cloud gaming gets better in the long term. I cannot imagine only
Now we are
being
getting
able to
spammed.
game in a cloud
That's a
resource.
pain in the ass here.
So
I blocked the
But
user.
hey, isn't it an absolute problem talking about having to make decisions? So generally, if I take my whole business and only work with OPEX, everything's in the cloud, everything's a contract, everything's just some kind of service I'm adding together to a package that I'm then selling to my customers. If I come into sticky situations like, for example, a pandemic, and can't pay my bills anymore, probably all my service partners will cease their service and say like, well,
Yeah.
even if our service was maintaining data for you, well, that's all gone, that's ours now, pay your bill or you'll never see your data again.
Yep.
Again, it all goes back to actually not the company that's going bankrupt and can't pay having the problems, us as customers, because I might be dependent on the third-party service I purchased from someone
Yeah, I
like.
mean, same. For example, if I, let's say, run into a scenario where I have to cut costs dramatically, and I would, for example, cancel my Shadow Cloud account so that I won't have a gaming cloud available for those, like really, like edge games where you need like 2080s or something like that. For example, then I would be thrown back to my local machine.
Yeah.
But I still have this local machine, so as long as I'm able to provide my energy bill, I can still
That is
game.
the point. That is the
So,
point. You still have to pay for your energy bill, for your communications bill, and so on and so forth. Because even if you had your machine still being available somewhere, well, if you can't afford, for example, the data center lease anymore, or if you can't afford the connectivity, you're still lost. So it's always a matter, I feel like, of combination. But from a personal perspective, I would definitely go way more the capex route instead of the opex route. There needs to be opex in place, frankly, because doing everything on capex is
I
pretty
think
hard.
OPEX and everything as a service is great to try out new paths, to try out new ideas. I think that is a perfect environment where you can just try things out. You are not risking your own, like, let's say your own personal security or your family, etc. You don't have to sell your house just um, to keep investing in some ideas, etc. So there are reasons why cloud is booming and has been booming
It's
ever
not just
since.
for trying out, frankly.
Oh, of course not. But even in the cloud business, you still have this different kind of flavors. We have people that want to have the dedicated infrastructures. You have people that are fine with shared infrastructures, which also is a huge difference in price. I mean, one of my favorite products that I utilize with OVH is the HPC, the hosted private cloud, because it is more pricey, but it has other options, other functions, other use cases, and also for a lot of customers, they want to know that there are dedicated machines that only they can use and only they will run their processes on. So.
Speaking on dedicated machines,
Well, it's about open hardware. I write code. With code, I make software. And if I'm open, I have an open source code that people can look at and change and whatever. This changes when you go into hardware and hardware architecture and hardware design. Because one of the main things about that is you need to buy components to build hardware. And these components, for the moment, are licensed. So even something like your architecture of your cores or of your CPU is something you have to acquire via a license to be able to use it or build it into your machine or whatever. And with open hardware, we're actually breaking a year-old licensing model to basically create a creative common of how things are built.
I need to contradict you to some extent, and not fundamentally, more like in the perception. I feel like it is absolutely comparable to open source. Perhaps not in regard to the way you do your subscription models or whatever, but if you look into the mindset behind it, we quite often, and just think of Huawei. Um, um,
Yes.
They say that they are spying for the Chinese government, because you cannot look into hardware to that extent. There might be backdoors, whatever. Speaking of a lot of US American products, networking equipment, and so on and so forth. If you would happen to have a truly open source, open source hardware, yeah, let's put it that way, that would do a lot for trustworthiness. And those absolutely, the Open Source Act 2028 is absolutely the right answer there. Because if you looked into the Open Source Act 2028, and specifically in the second amendment to it, published in 2030, it includes hardware and forces you to open source your hardware. So in 10 years from now, we will have that in place. No, but
I mean, but didn't we have this in a different kind of, like back in the day when I went to my first LAN parties and we had PCs, one of the best ways of tuning your PC was taking a ruler, going from contact point to contact point in the socket or on more or less on your CPU and drawing a line with a pencil. And with that, you were actually effectively overclocking your PC.
Yeah,
but the actual point about that is it was illegal because you were modifying your machine in a way that the terms and conditions of the producer of your CPU did not want you to do. Because, hey, they're not stupid. They know if you can tune your own PC with one stroke of a pencil, then they're effectively losing money. And that's why they closed down and shut down even their hardware design, so a way of putting things together. And that's wow, that's what we see nowadays with modern cars. If you open the hood, it's just one big piece of plastic staring at you, and even if you know a lot about motors, there's no chance in hell you're going to fix it yourself.
But before Dom is going to answer and giving a truly and thoughtful answer, from my perspective, I'd say it's not completely the same, because what you did at your LAN parties was basically, as you said, overclocking. Has nothing to do with open hardware. Has more to do with say, the weaknesses or the points where you could overclock. But what they want to do with that processor, and it's not just a RISC processor, I feel like the Open Power Foundation, the Open Power processors also, to some extent, an open source processor. I could ask a friend of mine who is working actively there. But the point is, that kind of open sourcing the hardware and making it not only available to everybody, but laying out what is going on, because frankly, hardware is available. I mean, I just can take some piece of hardware and just rip it apart. I mean, but basically,
and then retro engineer it, and basically off you go.
Exactly. But
your warranty.
The point from my perspective basically is, it would be a complete game changer if you would have that in place for pretty much everything. Not in regards to the composition. The composition of things, that's always open source, but basically that could be kept in the hands of the companies. But if you open source the base hardware, it would take away so many loopholes. It would take away so many doubts. It would.
Can I throw something into the mix
No?
for you to elaborate on? Because concerning open hardware, open design, Creative Commons, a couple of years ago there was this famous case, you know, with 3D printing coming up, that some guy put a design to build a gun with a 3D printer online. That's kind of the dark side of open hardware and of open source and of opening up different stuff. But yeah, well, no, just wanted to throw that in there actually. No
You
problem.
always, Chris, you always have that kind of border that you perhaps do not want to cross. You need to have some sort of regulations in there, and you can use a knife to basically smear your bread, or to I don't know, create awesome art on woods. I can't imagine what you would need a knife for otherwise. But it's basically
just like using a shovel. You can use it basically to dig up your garden or to knock over your neighbor. So
exactly.
Oh, bury my neighbor.
there are a lot of use
Kill
cases
your
for shovels,
neighbor!
yeah.
Kill him!
No, but what I think regarding the example that Chris mentioned, and I know it stirred up quite a huge discussion when these 3D printed guns were possible. And suddenly,
They still
actually,
are.
as usually,
They
governments...
They still are.
Yeah, of course. But
The recipes
first,
are still available.
of course they are. I mean, internet never forgets. But the first reaction was, oh my god, we have to ban the 3D printers. And that was like the first initial reaction, like, oh, if that's possible, we have to ban the 3D printers. And of course, luckily this didn't happen. But that was the first instinct reaction, like, okay, is there any way we can stop the spreading of these machines? And it's like, sorry, it's just something that enables you to do something bad. But that, just as you said, that goes for so many things. That goes for regular garden tools. I mean, you just go into every person's kitchen and you will find at least 10 to 20 items that can be used to cause immense damage to others. So it's always the use case that you are applying. And but I think having things, especially also hardware, in an open or more open source, doesn't have to be completely, but at least be much more accessible and analyzable for the people, because the dependency from private people and private persons on technology has reached a really critical amount. I mean, how hard is it today if you just you get a new laptop, or you just buy like a tablet or whatever? And I mean, we are all IT experts more or less. So, but I mean, just consider the regular guy in the street, people that are just using their tablet or their laptop to go on YouTube, write emails, do whatever TikTok stuff. I don't give. But how many settings do you actually have to tweak, change, modify, just for example, to get Cortana to shut up, to deactivate the micros?
Just use Win10 shut up, and then basically you can do that.
Yeah, or just get a Windows system to just create a local account. I know you are. Just to create a local account and not to give you a Microsoft cloud-based account again. So there is so many things that you have to deal with, that you have to confront. And if you have a more open source approach on the hardware, it will provide a much needed transparency, because I think the potential for loopholes, I mean, just targeted ads, etc., and the whole stuff. How many videos are there on the net of people that have just been discussing random stuff, and the next thing that you look up on your mobile is you get an advert for exactly the bullshit you were discussing like 30 minutes ago. Up to the point that people are trying to scam it on purpose, that they're talking about like, I don't know, needing nappies or whatever, or baby stuff, although nobody has a baby, and you just keep talking about
Dom,
babies just
really?
to wait.
Dom, I just received an ad for baby stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you do that to me?
So I think being forced to open source in the first place is a huge step into the right direction.
Can I ask a stupid question? Because most of the...
did.
Don't forget that I can mute you. Most of the secrets or the idea of keeping things secret is basically related to military stuff. I see everything. What if we would open source the military? What if we would open source tank plans? That's a nice one. I mean,
Maybe people will start to build
the
their own tanks in their
similarity
garage.
is given. It's definitely given. Wait, I go for my pad as well.
We're the Little Rainbow Club.
Oh, FGOT, they make good stuff.
I'm a
Let me
nerd.
guess, it's an overpriced 2080 Ti. Oh. I mean, I think with the military, and I think you should always be allowed to have secrets. But I think if
Should you?
But for example, military produces products not for the open market. I mean, it's not that you go to your Volkswagen and say, "Oh, what I need today is a Leopard 2."
But
they will say like, we have like 4 weeks delivery time.
Think of the export prohibition for Apple computers beginning of the 90s. Because they were basically supercomputers. And the same was true with the first Xbox, for example.
They did, they did it. I think it was PlayStation 2 that you could actually use because real-time 3D rendering. You could use them to steer cruise missiles. So yeah, of course you can. I mean, you can't stop people from. I mean, that's basically what hacking is all about. To ask not what is it meant to do, but what can I make it do.
That guy is
I think
so
that's.
Awesome. Dom is so awesome because speaking of hacking.
Moral fiber.
No. Chris, pardon me. But moral is nothing which we should discuss. Because we have too high standards for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I'm one of the good guys.
You are the good guy.
Yeah.
You know, look, basically, the two of us, Dom and Chris, we need actually to go a little bit down. So we are more like no, Dom, stay where you are.
Oh.
Because Chris, did I hear an ow? Because we are like evil Dom and good Dom. And whenever Dom is saying something, you need to get up and speak up.
This is getting.
Ever seen a bald angel?
I got an angel on my shoulder.
Well, my hair.
So I should replace the cat ears with horns and try to get a halo somewhere.
Oh yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. Okay, so you're now the angel with a solid plastic halo. Not too shabby. But I think, for example,
just to look back on ears.
Just to look back on the topic with the military, because I think military in the first instance is producing for a very close user group. I think it is more or less safe to assume that they do not necessarily have to be fully open source in the first place. And even, for example, further down the line, you will always retro-engineer those things.
Dom,
I mean,
Dom,
for example, if you develop
a little bit different, Dom, I wanted to touch on a little bit different aspect in there, because my question was, what would happen if we would open source military? Basically, the idea is to change a lot of things. I mean, you look at CIA, FBI, and so on and so forth. Look at military intelligence and those crap.
I think the war will shift more to a war on information. So I think if you make it all open source, probably people will stop shooting each other because they're hunting each other build plans.
Yeah, perhaps. But frankly, then let them hunt each other's build plans, and we would have some sort of equal opportunity for everyone. Does it make sense?
It's a bit like there is this idea or this simulation or thought experiment. What would happen if you gave everybody a gun with 6 bullets? So what would people do?
I'd say they shoot each other.
Shoot myself in the foot twice and then end up on my couch crying.
Yeah. But you only had
I
4
would shoot
bullets
my
left.
couch. I would
You
shoot
would be
my
at a
couch.
disadvantage.
But because that's a very, very interesting question, because there's a lot of philosophy behind it, because actually it isn't guns that kill people, it's people that kill
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And just regarding on the
So
issue
if
of
everybody has a gun, it doesn't change anything, because it's still people killing people. It's still down to people either doing the right or the
use
wrong.
a spoon to kill people. I don't need a gun. I don't need a gun for that.
yeah, spoon is much better. I mean, one wonderful example, thermite. So thermite is a wonderful powder. The basic thermite consists of aluminum and ferrum oxide, so basically rusty metal, rusty iron, things that are easily available in all households. And if you don't have iron that rust, you just basically apply water, some air, and you got rust. Take your old bike, whatever. So creating thermite ain't very hard, although you can do a metric ton of crap with it, and it's a really dangerous substance. And if you can also do it with copper, but I don't want to go down this road. But it's open source information, so it doesn't take you long to figure out how can I create thermite. And knowing that this is something that once you get it ignited, it's really hard to extinguish again. It melts through metal. It basically ruins your flat. And combined with ice, it gets really critical. So it's easily available. And it's open knowledge. I mean, the effect of thermite on ice is something that you could see on Mythbusters. So it's not something that you have to dive into the deepest and darkest corners of the darknet and discuss with most evil crimes, whatever, just to figure out how can I make thermite and what happens if I...
staying in that call after we stopped streaming, because I'm a little bit interested at the moment.
No, but maybe. But what I'm hinting at is this information is public. And still, you don't have people running around and nuking each other with thermite every day, you know? So there is
Not
a
yet.
kind of common sense. But I mean,
but
this
frankly,
is information
don't
that has been
speak
around.
of common sense if today is election day in the United States.
Oh yeah, right. There's that thing as well. Yeah, but I think okay. I mean, but it's in the States. Why should you bother to create thermite when you can just go down to your Walmart and get an AK? Sorry. So.
Or if you could just vote for the wrong guy.
But what I try to mention is that even though it's open source and easy and the knowledge is readily available for everyone, I don't think that this, just as Chris said, it's people that kill people, not the weapons. So, and just to know how to build a weapon, I mean, it's easy to build a crossbow, a bow. You don't even need to. It's easy to build projectile weapons without using firearms. The same, it's easy to create chemical explosives with household reagents. It's just, of course, it can be turned into the wrong approach, or it can be abused. But it's the same with everything. I mean, when you had the first cell phones.
Dom, what would be much more interesting than giving everyone a gun, because we know how that kindergarten will end, a lot of blood and dead people everywhere. But even more interesting would be if we kind of create a law that people like, for example, Jeff Bezos gives everyone on this planet $1 billion. He's still the richest guy. He still owns 993 billion. But let's see what happens then. Let's see what happens if everybody gets some form of chance. I don't want to call it equality, because it won't be equality, but some form of opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it connects a bit to when they made these experiments. Instead of like everybody gets a fixed salary from the state. You know, this in German they call it the bedingungslose Grundeinkommen, BGE.
Yes.
And actually, I think it's a great idea, because the first test runs were actually not made in Europe, but they were made in Africa, in small villages, where they just provided a specific amount of money that is a really good salary on a monthly basis to everyone in the village. And of course, everybody was like, oh, cool, people won't do anything. They will just get hammered the whole time. They did. They did nothing, and they got hammered really hard for a few weeks. And then they figured out that basically just being drunk the whole time and just doing party is not a fulfilling life. So what
Should
they
we
did is,
think about COVID-19 and
but what they
just
did is
sounds like my
they started.
story.
But actually, what they did is they figured out that they don't need the whole money, and they can still work and get additional money. And then they suddenly could save money, and they used a lot of it to build a school or to renovate to create kindergartens, etc. So suddenly, because you have this opportunity, it's what people make out of it. And most experiments show that, I think, as a whole, as a species, we are not basically programmed to screw each other over. But I think if you have a corporate mindset that adds to the pool, especially if it's a corporation that is not primarily run by the people in the corporation, but that are forced to react to this abstract being of a stock or shareholder value, I think that is something that is prone to corrupt the ideals.
Oh, shit.
But
Prone to corrupt the ideals. That's, just repeating it so I remember that. Wow.
But
Holy crap.
but
This whole new dimension.
But then, why do we let it happen?
Who is we?
Dom, why
I think-
do you let it happen?
I mean, working for a company that's family owned and run instead of being too much focused on shareholder value. I used to work for a company that was very shareholder
But
value orientated and
Dom,
investor.
but politically, you still let it happen. You don't go into partisan mode or whatever.
Like, okay, because why am I there? Because I do also, of course, have other responsibilities.
I work for a finance investor, and I sure hope he's a happy guy and that he's happy with what I'm doing all day long. Because I couldn't sleep at night if my finance investor wasn't happy, because then I would be a very, very individual.
And I think I've
Our
Suze,
CEO, Melissa.
like,
Working
hey,
for a company that is owned by a finance investor.
Yes.
But we don't make her responsible for all the poverty and
No.
situations in the world, don't we?
True. Very, very. I really like that article. Are we switching the news?
We did.
Oh.
I have to admit that she is right, although she's working for a finance investor.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the opportunity. I mean, everybody makes decisions on a daily basis. I mean, and I think it breaks down to personal moral standards. So, for example, I had a lot of quarrels in my career with a lot of account managers that tried to use my expertise as an argument to force customers to buy stuff that they don't need. And I hate it. And I go instantly in bitch mode if this happens. And I'm like, no, I would not suggest it because the customer doesn't need it. You're just trying to get your numbers by screwing over the customer, and you use my expertise as a leverage, like, oh, my techie says it too. So no, your techie says fuck you.
It's called pimping your nerds out. And it's
And actually, that's something where you can decide for yourself. Do I give in to the sales target and just be complacent? Or do I say like, hell no. Yay, Melissa. And I think I have had a lot of situations where I could choose between both sides. Or if I see an error in a setup, but it's still a huge setup and a lot of money. So will I raise the flag and say, yes, you could, but it's going to screw up? Or do I say like, just let them figure it out. They will find out soon enough. First wait until they have signed and paid. So I think that's classic situations where you're actually positioning yourselves and where you make in the long run you make a moral decision. So what are you prioritizing? Do you try to help others? Do you try to have a customer that comes to you with in most cases not a lot of ideas or not a lot of clue and not a lot of knowledge, but with a specific problem, and you could be able to help, or is your primary goal to get money?
Well, but
So
it's not that black and white, isn't it? Because
no, of course not. I mean,
you are sitting in a, and now I point at you because it's way easier to point at myself. Um, you are sitting in a comfortable chair, working for a company that is basically selling cloud services. And like half an hour before, we said, yeah, we would prefer mostly capex instead of opex. So the point is, I totally no, Dom, you do not need to answer that because there's no there's no reason for answering that because I just wanted to say that you definitely have your personal moral compass. We should have because it's basically the basis of what we do and where we basically it's the thing that guides us. But on the other hand, we are not living in some sort of a vacuum outside. The companies that we are working for or that we created, although we want them to be like the white knights or the cloud knights, or the green geckos, I guess it's what Chris wanted to say. Anyways, those companies still need to do decisions. They still need to perhaps even harm other companies because they are in a competitional state. They need to earn their money just for being a good guy. Or just being a good guy won't earn you anything. It basically, I promise you, it makes you
Good guy finish last.
Pardon me?
Basically it's if you compare, let's say a boxing fight that takes place in a tournament or like heavyweight champion class, blah, and a back alley fight after 2 hours in the pub. The later, you can play fair, but you won't win. So if you're stuck in an alley fight, you take whatever it takes.
Always kicking the balls.
Yeah, kicking the balls, throw sand in the face. It's just
no. I don't.
That's
do
not
that.
about
I
being
say
fair.
dare. I say, guys, please come into my arms. I love you. Ouch.
Aww. Please punch my face. It's good for punching.
And then I start crying because somebody
Then you
hit
go like-
my balls. Was basically placing the chair on my head. Yeah.
But I think, and that's I think also true for companies. So if you are start out as a company with really good morals, good ideals, and there are those companies, and then suddenly you hit the rough reality of market. For example, it's with banks. There is this one bank, and there are a few banks now that have focused on being
Sustainable, green,
let's say
ecologically, yeah.
sustainable, green.
Umweltbank.
Exactly,
Or
like
GLS
environmental bank,
Bank or
Umweltbank,
something like
GLS,
that.
for example. Yeah, and what I liked, for example, about GLS, they I think it's like 1 or 2 years back now, they asked their customers like, all right, we would ask you to pay a small extra fee for every customer or every family that's customer, whatever, because we don't want to pay provisions to our bank employees so that they don't try to sell stuff just to hit their numbers. So we try to give them a good payment that they don't need to hunt for bonuses, but are able to be good consultants without any personal gain, whether they sell something or not. So in order to achieve this, we must ask our customers if you are willing to pay a bit more extra so that we as a company are able to pay our employees. So, and long story short, they didn't lose customers in the long run.
No,
So
why should they?
and
But on the other hand,
exactly
for
because
example, look,
they,
Dom, for example, look at companies such as Google, who started out as student projects. They actually had a mantra of never be bad, and now they are competing in Pentagon kind of catch-ups there, and they
Catch
are the
up!
bad ones. So it changes you, it changes your organization. But when I asked you about that, that was actually the point I wanted to touch upon. Your company might not always be able to behave just like you would behave as a singular person. You need to have your moral compass, and it's always some sort of a compromise you have to take. Frankly, we as Claudical, we consider ourselves to be among the good ones, and still we had to let people go. We had to change directions. We had to reinvent things, and it's not always a positive thing because it implies a lot of pressure on people. It basically makes them feel uncomfortable and makes them perhaps leave. And to some extent, we need them actually to leave, or we needed them to leave, because in the end, as a company, you are another kind of body that is living to some extent and needs to
There's
make
also
up its mind.
being sorry, but being morally consistent doesn't mean that you are always nice to everyone.
Exactly.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's something that is a
Absolutely.
huge misconception
and
between.
it's also kind of the art of making fair and good decisions, because the thing is, saying like a smaller sized company, of course you could be a CEO and say, I'm not going to fire anyone, but since I'm not firing anybody, I have too much cost and we're going to be bankrupt in
My
3 months.
dad did that,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
he
Or
went bankrupt, and nobody thanked him for that. Nobody. He lost his pensions, he
exactamente.
lost his health, literally, and he nearly ended up on the street. So I've seen that in person actually, because he did not want to fire his 2 employees when the business broke down like 25 years ago. He wanted to be the good guy because he loved those guys. He liked to work with them. They were good. From his perspective, they were a great team. But frankly, the moment the things started to break down, those guys were gone, and you cannot blame them for that. And nobody thanked him for that. Nobody. He himself did not thank him for that because he realized too late that he made a mistake. Just working along your moral compass, or just trying to be the good guy, it's not going to work. But as a person, as a human being, totally on your side, you need to live along your moral compass. Although you need to be aware of, and you guys are absolutely, we all are. But we need to live along those kind of distractions and along those, things that do not look perfect along the way.
But I think this loops back to right kind of the beginning of our talk today, when I said if you take the flexibility and the, let's say, the easy option to, or the changeable or the changing nature of an, let's say, an OPEX approach to the world compared to a CAPEX approach, and right at the beginning I said one is great on a personal scale and the other on a corporate scale. So, and I think this is where those two worlds are basically now clicking together or being opposed as always. Again, because as I said, you won't like to have a person with an OPEX mindset as a close friend.
Don't get high off your own supply.
That was Public Enemy or NWA. I think an NWA.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was more like niggas.
Yeah, exactly, for life. Yep. No.
Get banned. Damn it.
He dropped the N bomb. How could he?
I I just wanted to say you are not supposed to use that word.
Yes.
Oh.
But I think, and that is also where it's hard to get a final conclusion. And I think it always will boil down to individual situations. I think it's hard for any kind of company to always try to be the good guys, because
You cannot.
if you
Frankly,
are
you cannot.
exactly, you can't, because you have also responsibilities for your people,
Did
for the
Bill
people
Gates,
that
for
make a
example,
company
Dom,
that
Dom,
are.
did Bill Gates start Microsoft with the intention of basically ruling the world, of being the company, being famous for being evil? No.
I think
They started with
I,
ideals. They just wanted to make software. They just wanted to do great things. They were truly idealists back then.
He
I'm
started with a
curious.
little nifty deal together with IBM, creating
Can
his
you
own monopoly
again
right out of the
IBM?
box.
Now we have the organization to blame. It's always IBM.
But I wonder at what point Bill Gates has kind of, like stopped in his tracks and looked at what he did, or basically what he has created, and just to see this, oh my God, what have I created? Or what has this
Would he?
thing
I have a
grown
good
into?
movie tip or a viewing tip for you and our viewers on Netflix. There is a docu-series called Inside Bill Gates, Inside the Brain of Bill Gates, or Inside Bill Gates, something like that. No, the second one sounds weird. Inside the Brain of Bill Gates. But generally, exactly what you wanted to know is explained there by Bill Gates himself
But
and Melinda Gates
but
and a lot of others.
without having seen those that series, frankly, if I would be Bill Gates, and even
Yes.
if I would now think of or imagine living in the 90s, would I feel bad about what I did? No, because frankly, I just did business. I pay good salaries. I'm a very successful and visionary inside Bill's brain. Okay.
Inside Business.
I would be. I would be. Frankly, I would not feel bad, wouldn't I? And if we look at, for example, Microsoft or Bill Gates from that perspective, I mean, frankly, Microsoft's business model is perhaps not our business model. And perhaps to some extent their way of approaching communities and open source is 180 degrees different from ours. But is Microsoft a bad company, behaving badly, whatever? No. They just try to win their game. I cannot, frankly, if that's the interesting
You'd
thing,
be a
because
good
I'm
Bill Gates. Who would be a good Bill Gates, Carsten?
Chris,
They didn't
to be
start
honest,
off with
Chris,
the
to be
intention
honest,
to, all right, let's take over the world and screw everybody. That was never
no,
the intention.
but he did not do that from his perspective. He did not screw anyone.
No, he just paved his way, and it's actually, you can't blame others. I mean, it's kind of similar to the impact of the iPhone. And I mean, just look back 20, 30 years when Nokia was like 20 years ago, Nokia was the state of the art mobile
12 years
phone.
ago.
Indestructible,
12
ran
years
for
ago.
weeks.
Even 12 years ago.
Even 12 years ago, it was still the hot shit. And then
When
other
was the
technologies
first
came.
iPhone released? 2004, 2006?
2009.
2009. Holy shit. 11 years.
2008,
But suddenly-
pardon me. 2008. 7.
Then you had a few developments based basically on operation system wise when Nokia got stuck with their Symbian, and then suddenly you had Android and iOS, and yeah, of course you also had like some Windows phones, but forget about those. Yeah, but suddenly it was the consumer reaction that actually had this impact. It was clever designed. It was something that got people to want this product. I mean, having people set up a camp in front of your stores because next morning you might get the new iPhone, whatever. I mean, what, you can't blame the company for people being lunatics, So
Yeah, but that was not the point with Bill Gates, I feel like. The point with
Oh,
Bill
that's
Gates,
that's good.
the point with Bill Gates was more like he made Microsoft the big evil and would he? How would he reflect on that nowadays? And frankly, if I would be Bill Gates again, I wouldn't feel sorry for many things I did, and not just because I was successful. Because I feel like if you just look, I haven't seen the documentation, definitely not, but I looked a little bit in my past and I looked into the way Microsoft evolved over years. It was quite straightforward, one step after the other. You have a competitor, you fight that competitor. You have a decent amount of market share, you try to increase that market share. You don't need to be evil in that regard. I mean, you are confronted with companies like IBM just saying OS2, who basically screw up a lot. So what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to shut down your business because they are not able to compete?
Although Microsoft did some shady stuff in the past,
But
I can't blame it directly on Bill Gates.
Dom, which
Yeah,
company
but
did
actually generating false checksum error messages, etc., just to scare
Human
users
mistakes.
because.
So, you know, maybe to lighten this up, if I was Bill Gates,
you would look awesome.
I would be very, very sad that nobody knows that Bill is actually the short form for William and my name is actually William Gates. That would be my problem.
H. Gates?
Exactly.
Close to William Wallace.
I'm not sure, but I felt like it
one of the most famous people on the planet, and nobody knows your real name.
And wouldn't it be?
Oh,
wouldn't it be?
Nice meme.
Wouldn't it be?
And also,
William
it makes me sad to
Gates
see him.
the third, if I recall properly.
Yeah, because of course, you know, Microsoft, it was founded in a garage. It was a poor person, underprivileged guy who opened that company.
William H. Gates, right. William H. Gates the third. William Henry Gates the third. And why do I know that?
Because you can Google.
I'd be sad that nobody knows my name if I was Bill Gates.
But speaking of moral, I feel like what we worked out today, without wanting to do that, but we worked out, and I feel like a pretty awesome truth there. That is basically moral is changing and basically depending on your position, isn't it?
It shouldn't.
But it is.
But of course, it changed. I mean, a lot of, for example, for me, a lot has changed since my daughter's born. So, yeah, of course, a lot changes once you have a family. But I think one of the biggest changes for me personally is that I'm much more aware of my morals, because now I'm basically under a constant surveillance from someone.
Are you aware of your morals or your ethics?
I think more the morals, because ethics are relative. So, and ethics, I think everybody has a very subjective moral list or list of morals, Moralkader. But ethics are usually more abstract. So you will never. So you have an Ethikkommission, but you won't have a Moralkommission. So
intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to have something.
To quote Winston Churchill, if you are 20,
when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yes, but if you are 20 years of age and you are not a communist, I would call you a heartless person. And if you are 40 years of age and still a communist, I would call you a stupid moron. It's not one by one quote, but basically, frankly, the message there is even morals are changing, constantly changing. And perhaps
morals are like assholes. Everybody should have one.
Yeah.
But they smell from time to time.
But in all your changing morals, you should, for example, never cross ethic boundaries.
That's just what I wanted to
You know?
say. The things that guide you, you know, inside or in an invisible kind of line, is basically not your morals; it's your ethics.
Mm,
Because your moral is
I
constantly
think you
changing. It's evolving.
Holy moly!
more or less hard to say. So yeah, I have changed a few morals. Or basically, I have grown to discard morals that I figured out to not be helpful. So I was quite a when I started online gaming, I was a really mischievous character. So
Rest of the friends
I would
too.
never play fair. So for example, if I would have if someone in the group would start to get on my nerves, and then I would challenge them to a duel outside Ironforge in World of Warcraft. And why outside of Ironforge? Because I was a shadow priest, so I just mind controlled your character and jumped down the cliff. Because the graveyard is ages away, and if you jump down the cliff, you get damaged armor, and you have to pay to repair your armor, which usually
Move.
won't happen
Oh,
in a duel because you usually give up at the end of the duel. But I figured out how I can kill someone in a duel. So yeah, being
But where's it,
complete
Dom?
dick
Dom,
moves.
where's the
Yeah,
difference
so
to now?
it's a fucking
I stopped playing
miracle that
WoW.
you actually are married and have a kid, man. It's a fucking miracle. Be so lucky about.
So yeah, of course I had this really toxic personal morals because I just found it funny because okay, you troll me, I troll back, and I can troll harder. And it took quite
Had
some time for me to actually figure out that um, actually I don't need this anymore because I had some personal growth in the yes, even I could have some personal growth, and I decided, all right, you don't have to do this. Actually, you don't have to get triggered by this approach. You don't have to get triggered by every stupid comment and just forget it. I mean, and then I found out that you can drive people even more nuts by being extremely friendly. So this drives them even more up the walls. So that's perfect. So now instead of
That's
trying
why we
to
are so friendly
own
with each
people,
other.
always,
I really appreciate you guys.
guys,
I
we
always love
are
what you say.
closing in on the 90-minute mark. So
Oh,
Yeah, I need to go shopping, by the way.
doing
hashtag stay at home.
some capex
I
investments,
need
right?
to buy some rolls of toilet paper.
Somebody once told me that.
The world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest
sharpest tool
target in the shed. He was looking kind of dumb with his finger and his thumb in the shape of
of
an
a head
L.
on
His
forehead.
forehead. Well, the clouds start coming and they don't stop coming. Check your vanilla stack and you keep it all running.
Oh, not too bad. We should produce a song. Yeah,
Yes,
Cloudical Anthem.
the cloudical anthem. Ooh.
And you automatically replace the boot up sound of every Windows machine with it.
Okay,
Oh,
now
yeah.
you got me back. Now you got me back. Guys, then let's wrap
Hey,
it here.
this show has it all. We have philosophies, morals, ethics, technology, music,
Rap, spontaneous rap.
community
Bad
stuff,
words.
Carsten imagining being Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Holy
No, it's
moly.
wrong. It's Bill Gates imagining being Carsten.
Mm.
I bet he does.
I
I
The Chuck
bet he does.
know he
the
does.
Chuck Norris situation,
When he
right?
role plays with Linda, he plays Carsten.
I would do that. I mean, I do that day in, day out.
You role play yourself. We can have next week can be the cosplay edition, and everybody can choose somebody or something to cosplay.
No, honestly, next week we have a guest.
Oh, true that. Heard.
We have an awesome guest next week. No, we won't tell you who it is. Just tune in next week because it's going to be awesome. That guy truly kicks security and build processes and stuff like that.
It's gonna be awesome, Carsten, because normally when we have intelligent and technical guests, you know, we're kind of we have a problem. We have Dom. Now we have Dom. We're gonna use him as a weapon.
We use our Dom against that guy.
I feel weaponized.
I mean, the point is truly, Dom is our kind of don't know the word Feigenblatt. Basically,
Big leaf.
Exactly. Because frankly, Chris and I, we are the perverts here, and he is the one, you know, giving us some sort of credibility. Thank you, Dom, for
that. Of all things. Well, what a choice to be made.
Guys, it was an awful pleasure. No, I like it. I love it. I truly love it. You made my evening. Let's stop it here.
It was an utmost pleasure to meet your acquaintance.
Hip hip, old bean. It was quite the pleasure.
Oh, yes. Oh, blimey, bloody me. I forgot my cup of tea.
Blimey, I gotta get recording. Because I gotta finish my code on my repository. Put it on GitHub.
Well, thing is, if English, like native English people listen to this, they probably go like, "Oh my god!"
Well,
the crowds again.
That's one of our strengths. We do not even pretend that we know what we are talking about. So, well, I don't pretend being able to speak English. I just speak German. That's my accent. That's it.
I mean, lucky you. I mean, we can just be lucky that you haven't adopted the regional accent too much. So,
which one?
Or the one where your company would be called Cloudical, and you would have at least the vanilla stack.
Kind of problem you have with that kind of accent. I feel like it's quite a reasonable accent.
So it's not an accent, it's more kind of a missed opportunity to do greater. But you can take the vanilla stack and then you can put Kubernetes as an operating system and, for example, bare metal